Ladies and gentlemen, dear students, dear friends of the MCI, dear alumni, dear partners, I'm more than pleased to welcome you to this wonderful event. I'm sitting here in Innsbruck in the heart of the Alps, of the Tyrolean Alps. And as you can see, the weather is beautiful and all is nice. And we are celebrating, actually we have been celebrating our 25th Jubilee anniversary this year. And this is one of the highlights of our Jubilee event series. And it is about change makers, and change makers towards a sustainable future. Now, the MCI, as you are all aware, we are a spin-off, a spin-out of the public university of Innsbruck, owned by a consortium including the region, the city, the chambers, and so on, bridging university with the business world, with a special emphasis to entrepreneurship, startups, and so on. And now, entrepreneurship is not just business and economic impact, it is also social impact. And it is changing the world also towards sustainability with respect to different impact types like ecology and so much more. And this is why I'm so happy and so proud to be the host of this distinguished guest event. Now, let me briefly welcome our guests, our distinguished guests of today. The co-host, the co-organizer of this event, and I'm very grateful to have you here, is Brigitte Mohn. Brigitte Mohn, you are a member of the executive board of Bertelsmann Stiftung. You are presently, I assume, in Bielefeld. A very, very warm welcome to you, Brigitte.
Thank you.
Now we have also, as the event is called, change makers. Change makers towards a sustainable future. We have been, Brigitte especially, and also the MCI, we have been thinking about who would be the ideal persons, the ideal personalities to present how to do change in a very comprehensive and versatile meaning. And I'm more than pleased to welcome now, in the series, as I see it on my screen, Amit Pradhan.
Okay.
Amit, you Amit, you are the executive chairman of Rainfall, and presently, I assume, in San Francisco. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here. I think it must be quite early in the morning for you, isn't it?
It is now 8 a.m.
Yeah,
so
8 a.m. You had to get up early in the morning. Now, the next one.
This is an honor.
Me. Sorry, you had to get up early in the morning, and you have been traveling a lot, and that brings in some special challenges with respect to time lag and all that. Now, the next one on my screen is Peter Shellstrat, and Peter is the co-founder and chief executive of Ubuntu, the environmental solutions platform based in Atlanta and in Amsterdam. I think you are presently in Atlanta, right?
That is correct, and I'm moving to Amsterdam this summer. When I saw your background, I want to be closer to natural background like yours. So. Thanks, Andreas and Brigitte, for this invitation. Really an honor and pleasure to be with you today.
Thanks a lot, Peter, for being here. Philipp van der Wippel, you are presently in Berlin, and you're the managing director of Project Together. Is this correct?
That's correct. Thank you very much for the invitation, Brigitte and Andreas.
Thanks for being here. Then on my screen, it is Sebastian Borek. Sebastian, what are you doing, and where are you now?
Hopefully changing the world, but at present I'm in Bielefeld, that's Germany. Thanks for the invitation. I'm looking forward to a great discussion.
Thank you so much. And then last but not least, our local hero, Marcel Huber. He is sitting in Schwarz, Tirol, not too far away from myself. Welcome to you, dear Marcel. Can you hear us, Marcel? Marcel, you seem to be frozen, which is very unusual for you. Marcel, you can hear us? Would you just activate your microphone? I cannot hear you. Marcel? Now, elsewise, take your time. Marcel is the founder and the chief executive of Syncraft. Syncraft creates power plants, ecological power plants, but he will tell us more about it later on. Now, before I hand over to Brigitte, who is, I'm keeping it short because Brigitte will do the intro keynote. Before I hand over to Brigitte, let me all thank you once again for being here. And let me give you some technical and organizational indications now. Now, this session is about change makers, presenting their cases and giving the opportunity to ask them and to discuss with them how to create a better future, especially with respect to the topic of sustainability. And they all will give a first brief outline of what they are doing, of where they are heading, what they are heading for, about aspirations, emotions, and their mission. Then you, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear audience, you are kindly invited to send questions, and the questions will be sent to me, will arrive here on my screen, and I will do my best to bring them in. So, and the questions can be sent and are very welcome at livetalk@mci.edu. I repeat, livetalk@mci.edu. And last but not least, before I really hand over to Brigitte Mohn, let me thank our media partners. Our media partners organizing this event today is the Austrian Press Agency, is Tiroler Tageszeitung, is Südtiroler Wirtschaftszeitung, the Austrian daily Die Presse and Wirtschaftskurier in Bavaria. And the event is being done in cooperation with the ESMT in Berlin, the Ban Ki-moon Center in Vienna for Global Citizens, and Lebensraum Tirol Holding. So now I'm done. I look forward to all these little stories of yourself, and I look forward to the questions by the audience. Brigitte Mohn, you are the hero regarding sustainability and regarding impact. I look forward to your keynote.
Thank you, Professor Altmann, and thanks for the invitation. Dear students, dear guests, I congratulate you very warmly on the 25th anniversary of the Management Center in Innsbruck and their success in educating young people and preparing them for taking leading roles in entrepreneurship if they choose to. I'm very honored to speak here today and in the discussion afterwards. I couldn't really imagine a better place to get into a dialogue about improving the conditions for the future than here, where the fundament is laid for leadership and reflective critical thinking. Linking knowledge and solution-based oriented work on real problems is really crucial. Applied knowledge gives the option to develop, to test, redefine, and implement. After finishing school, choosing a course of study is a conscious decision for a direction in one's life, even then when it's later, it takes many different path variations. Being entrepreneurial and a change maker has a wide range of skill sets. You have to be brave, you have to be determined to build and create something new. You have to be super perseverance, self-reflective, and very often diplomatic and capable of leading people and alliances. Besides being successful creating a company, building markets, developing products, and creating innovation, personal wealth, there should be always the question on how to serve as well to the common good. To create change, you need space, freedom, trust, and a stable political environment. The topic of shaping the future is extremely important now. Giving access to equity and redefining equality in wealth will be one of the key tasks of the young generation. That in a world where we are facing enormous challenges, it must be our goal to maintain the Earth as a sustainable home. There are enough studies to prove that we are living beyond our means and resources. The agenda of the United Nations 2030 shows us the road path how we should move. We know the facts, and science delivers already enough substantial development goals, and we know the challenges closing the gap to do this. So we have enough evidence to reverse our actions and behaviors and shift industries and societies towards sustainable nations, regions, cities, and organizations and way of living. Greta, as well as Amanda Gorman, we saw at the Biden election, as representatives of the young generation, point out to the fact no one can deny this. And until now, for billions of people, there's no planet B. So we need to change the system and what lies behind it. Mariana Mazzucato sums up what needs to be done in her new book, Mission Economy, as follows. It's about creating a solution-based economy focused on the most ambitious goals, the one that really matters to people and to the planet. It's about transforming government from within and strengthening its systems, those for health, education, transport, or the environment, while giving the economy a direction. For this, we need a systemic approach that affects all our spheres of life. It will be crucial that we succeed in reorienting the economy in a meaningful way. That means, in a big scale, defeating corruption, totalitarian system approaches, and misuse of data, and the loss of implementing scientific knowledge into the private and third sector. It means, on the positive side, building multilateralism alliance across continents and nations to prevent further damages concerning protecting the environment and shifting the economy into a circular direction. This implies redefining incentive structures to collaborate in financing innovation and change. Close my first remarks with the privilege and the responsibility of an entrepreneur and change maker from my point of view. Being successful as an entrepreneur includes as well the opportunity, the challenge, and the responsibility to act as well in the interest of the common good and the preservation of the earth. In the economic context of the future, mission-driven entrepreneurship should be the gold standard. It's upon us what happens and which direction we take on. The young generation has learned something that is really, really crucial. We have to work in networks with collective agendas and actions, building momentum in knowledge sharing and challenging the old hierarchical structures. You, the students who are listening, have the chance to shift away from the old system. We will see this in the discussion with entrepreneurs here being online and who are already change makers with their approach. I'm very much looking forward to the discussions and your questions later. Thank you very much.
Our change makers, what are you doing as the Bertelsmann Stiftung? Perhaps because all the others have had the opportunity to present what they are doing, or will have the opportunity, if you would give us some indications. What is the concept of Bertelsmann Stiftung, and what is your mission or your ambition? If you would like to share some ideas.
I think what's really crucial is that we saw that fragmented solution buildings won't really change or basically change the systems and the tasks we have to do. And I think the Green Deal shows, or in many other respects, the SDGs show that we can only combine this. And what we are doing in the Bertelsmann Stiftung is bringing ecosystem builders and creators of new concepts and solutions together, and basically define the systemic approach how to go this road. The implementation and the production of the solutions have to be basically done by others, but we build the system frameworks for that.
Thank you so much. I think that has brought an important info to the audience. I'm not sure how familiar they are with the Bertelsmann Stiftung, and you've been doing a terrific job. And I think the value of the Stiftung is unbelievably important. Thank you so much, Brigitte, and once again for co-hosting, co-organizing this event. Now, we have been suggesting that our 5 change makers present their case. Who would like to start? I think we have been sending out an order, but the order is not really a compulsory one. Again, perhaps with Amit. Is it okay if we start with you?
Yeah, very happy to. Again, thank you for having me, Andreas and Brigitte. And it's an honor to be here with my fellow change makers. You know, my background has always been in deep tech. From the time that I was 17, I built my first deep tech startup, and I was very fortunate to have it acquired 4 years later in the US, and that's how I moved from Sydney, Australia to the US. The journey of creating deep tech startups and having success along the way taught me a very important lesson, which is if you're using exponential technology for anything but to fundamentally create a net positive impact on the planet and the humans that borrow this planet, then you are wasting the biggest opportunity that time has given you. And I made this personal position statement for myself, saying that I would never invest, influence, or create anything that doesn't have a net positive impact on the humans that we are intended to serve. And having that focus allows you to deeply change the way that you think about how you can use your talents, your access, your privilege in fundamentally affecting the planet in a positive way. And going down that route in a very targeted manner allowed me to look at my background in artificial intelligence, my early entry into the space of decentralization and blockchain, and brought me to this understanding that we can use frontier technology like IoT, AI, blockchain to, at scale, impact changes that some of the best entrepreneurs with the best intentionality struggle to do because you don't get the power of that exponential tech behind you. And so I started focusing entirely on creating fundamental solutions that use the power of AI and blockchain to create the future of a fair, sustainable economic model around the resource of the future, which is the one that transitions from what I call oil and toil, where you're constantly looking at what you find under the earth that we inhabit, and then spend time building industries and industries on top. And all of those are finite resources, and instead focusing on the resource that is abundant and growing all the time, which is data that we all produce, and how we take that new resource and create a fair economic model so that we can create not just a basic income, but what I call the universal earned income for the next billion humans around the world without having to rely on taxes or free money, but on the value that we are all generating, whether we sit in San Francisco or Bielefeld, or whether we are Rashida, the refugee sitting in a a camp outside Syria, or the human without the privilege of shelter in the streets of Mumbai in India, who still uses an old Android phone and delivers lunch tiffins from someone's home to their office. And recognizing this human value and being able to compensate that human value in a fair, sustainable way is the core focus of what I'm doing with the access to technology and the background that I have.
Thank you so much, Amit. May I just, again, to help our audience a bit, would you have 2 or 3 examples to get, what kind of product or who is your client, just, to give a little clue about, or some flesh to the bone?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And so the idea behind the Rainfall Initiative is to create this concept of a daily income from the data that people produce. So the first example of who we're doing this for is a program we call Rainfall for Moms. We have a network of 4 million moms. It's a support network around the world, and it's the world's hardest, most thankless job today, right? And finding a way to not just help these moms and not be, use the world of Facebook or big tech, if the product is free, you are the product. How do we shift the model, and instead of taking, the mom information and selling it to advertisers and just targeting them, what Rainfall does instead is uses their data in a completely privacy focused way. So no personally identifiable information is ever extracted from their daily activities. And it creates intelligence on top of that data, which is valuable to businesses from that demographic perspective. But the income that comes in from selling that intelligence actually flows back to these moms. So instead of having a model where you're on one hand a support network for moms, but on the other hand, you're either charging them to be part of the network or selling them, in a sense, to advertisers. Instead, the model has now been flipped, where you can actually responsibly not just support them, but actually compensate them and create a regular income for them. So that's an example of about 4 million moms that are being onboarded into the Rainfall system that will have this service. Another very quick example is, I mentioned the refugee case. We're working with exploring a model of Rainfall for refugees, because in the world of traditional data, we always think of, oh, well, if we can spend, 8 Swiss francs on a latte, then our data is more valuable. But if you think about Rashida, the refugee living in one of these camps outside of Syria, her heart rate, pulse rate, density of population around her, number of steps taken, humidity in the air are far greater value drivers for clinical trials for AstraZeneca or any of the other Moderna, Pfizer vaccine makers than us sitting in the comfort of where we are. So these are the kind of examples that we are building for, because we believe that this capture of human value and the recognition of it needs to be for the next billion humans, not only for those who already encapsulate 95% of the control of the world.
Thank you so much, Amit. That helped a lot, and I think I really got the picture of what you're doing. Now, Brigitte, may I hand over to you? You have been putting these change makers together, that you lead us, you guide us through Peter, Philip, to Sebastian, and then I will come in with Marcel, if this is okay. So, elsewise, I run into the danger of speaking too much.
I love to have it shared and being as a team. So Peter, I think we always, at least in Germany, I think in many other regions in the world, we are very much problem focused, you're solution focused. And I think that's something coming from the top and from from the bottom-up approach, is something from the expert side, and creating change on the local level. That is something that I found in the ecosystem worldwide amazing, as it's an invitation to really crowdsource knowledge and scale it. And I think maybe you should define it, how you came to build this up and what your vision is.
Wonderful, and thanks, Brigitte, for the introduction. I'm a bit of an entrepreneur late bloomer. The reason why I live in Atlanta right now is used to be with Coca-Cola for almost 20 years, believe it or not. Originally from Belgium, but I lived in Africa, Asia, Southeast Asia. I lived in the Philippines and Thailand and Morocco. And at more or less half of my career, I was thinking about the next half of my career. And that's where I've decided to become an entrepreneur, an ecopreneur actually, an entrepreneur for the environment. And I think it's important for you, and that's, we have a lot of students today. Back in the days, I believe we had to, and many of my co-students believe we had to choose between a calling and a career, right? And I think is different right now. I think it is possible, and the stars align to make a career and a calling at the same time. And that's also one of the reasons why I started Ubuntu. Not just because of ideology, and that's a big portion of it, of course, having seen the impact of environmental issues from close by in countries like the Philippines and Morocco, but also because of opportunity. And so, and a little bit because of frustration. And the frustration was the following. I found it quite amazing how, despite all the great intentions of the governments, of big corporations, very little has happened in the last 20 to 40 years. Very little. And a lot of that has to do with the massive gap between the ambitions of these organizations and the implementation. Right? So there's a massive gap between the two. And we asked ourselves, why is that? Now, what can we do about it? And a lot of the issues are related to, as Brigitte called it, she was talking about fragmentation. Now, there's a lot of fragmentation. There's a lot of goodwill at the top, but they're not connected to the groundswell of innovators and entrepreneurs around the world. And there's literally hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs embracing new technologies in biology and physical tech and digital technologies. There's a groundswell looking for scale, and there's the people that have the scale that don't know who the entrepreneurs are. And so we say, well, what if we took a page out of the books of platform technologies and principles? Like, isn't it amazing that just in a couple of seconds you can order an Airbnb or Uber or an Airbnb, but when it comes to environmental solutions, it takes you hours and sometimes days, right? So the purpose of Ubuntu is an environmental platform, a solutions platform, is to give exponentially easier, faster, and better access to environmental solutions. That's one, environmental solution innovation. Second is knowledge. And knowledge can be anything between best practices to academic articles and industry reports. And third is a community of experts and professionals trying to solve the same issues that you're trying to solve. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel again. We started this platform about 2 years ago. It's growing quite rapidly. It's a B2B platform, right? But we're now close to 15,000 members, just to maybe have 2,000 more members coming on board. We have, we're going towards 8,000 solutions in what have you. So there's a lot of activity going on the platform, but it's just a start. We just started, and we are very happy to see the momentum going behind this.
Thank you so much, Peter. I think later on we go in the further discussion, we come back to that. Philip, you're one of the really core people, motivated and really, I think you're a role model, at least in the German context, as a young and social entrepreneur. And I think it's amazing what you have done as you're still extremely young. And you started early as well, so pretty much like Amit. And maybe you will tell us, you're very solution focused as well, what your model is and what you're doing. And my admiration goes to the young generation here.
Thank you very much for having me today, and I hope you can see me well and can hear me well. And yes, I mean, when I started the project together, or the idea that we need a new problem solution process, because the processes we're having as society to solve problems are not enough or not fast enough to really manage this transformation we really have to achieve in the next few years, especially looking at the next generation really being affected from the next 40, 50, 60, maybe even 70 years, now being 25. It's so massive what we have to accomplish, not only for our children and grandchildren, but really, just purely for our own lives. And when I was 16, I was really pushing this question to myself: what is the most effective way I can contribute to this transformation and to these problems like climate change, like these problems like intergenerational justice, like these problems of devastating increase of mental health problems in our generation. And I was really frustrated to see that, from outside, the political parties and many established ways of bringing about social change seem to be quite ineffective, seem to be important, but still, in a way, not enough, not ready for what is coming next and what my generation wants to do. And my moment of becoming a social entrepreneur, a public entrepreneur, a system entrepreneur was when I, as a young student, at the age of 16, I went to the northwest of England, and I met a Syrian guy, a Syrian classmate, and we started a civil rights initiative with respect to the civil war in Syria, with the idea of how can we create more empathy among English high school students for what is happening to the young generation in Syria. And it was really an entrepreneurial moment, because two young guys really not having any influence, what can you do? And we just started to have live Skype conversations, or organized live Skype conferences between the morning assemblies in our school and some former friends from Ibrahim he had still back in Syria. And it was really, we didn't know whether this works out, whether this will have any effect, but it has had a massive effect. And I still remember when hundreds of co-students really having tears after having these conversations with really, people at the same age, what's happening in Syria right now. And then this same format of having live Skype conferences got transferred to many other schools, and within 4 or 5 weeks, it scaled all over the region. And so then the House of Parliament, the British Parliament, contacted us a few weeks later, saying this is a really impressive bottom-up initiative. You should bring it to the House of Parliament. You should get the sponsorship by the Prime Minister. And eventually, it became a format, got adapted by the BBC. And so this was, for me, the initiation moment of realizing, first of all, everyone can be the change. Everyone can make something happen, but only if you dare to get started and not wait to be asked. Because if we think about change, nobody will ask you to start, because change is always hard and change always is tough. So nobody will, nobody will ask you. The second thing was, I realized that showcasing what is possible is the first way to demystify wrong myth. Because I think a lot about the systemic change we don't see right now is because we're still following myth we at some point started to believe but which is just wrong. And I think the role of social entrepreneurs is a lot about demystifying wrong myth and seeing, no, climate change does not contradict with economic growth. No, it's not the case that the young generation has necessarily different interests like the old generation. There are all those myths, and I think that was the point when I realized we don't only need a few people working on those concrete proof of concept that another world is possible, but we have to have hundreds of people, young people, having the same experience like me. So we started a project together exactly to systematize that, with the question of like what happened to Ibrahim and me in the Syrian campaign. How can this happen with thousands of people? So we then built up an organization which is a mission-oriented open social innovation platform. What does it mean? It means that we start big open innovation processes where especially young people can develop their ideas, their initiatives, all to one specific challenge. May it be the reduction of plastic, may it be the fight against COVID. And we realized that the digital, the digitalization enables us to have a complete new process of really collecting bottom-up initiatives, coordinating them, and bringing them together with top-down institutions. And at the beginning of COVID, I think it was really the breakthrough of this mission-oriented open innovation, because when we started to launch Wir versus Virus, 27,000 people participated within 2 days. 2,000 members of the public administration handed in their challenges, and over 1,500 solutions got developed, and more than 130 of them really got implemented then also by the government. So I think my story is about that. For the transformation ahead, we really have to rethink the role of citizens. We have to rethink the role of the state. We really have to rethink also the role of business. And I think related to what Brigitte said and what Mariana Mazzucato is bringing forward, is really about how can we operationalize this idea of a mission-oriented society. And this is also our own mission.
Thank you, Philip, so much. I guess it's very much in line, even though in different countries and maybe with different approaches of Amit and Peter and Sebastian. You are basically, I think, as well moving in this direction, trying to educate young people to change the world.
Absolutely. Thank you for being part of this, all of you. So excited to just listen. In fact, I just listened to enjoy listening to all of you, what you do, and we should hang out together. I think it will be crazy what comes out of it. Anyway, maybe a few words what my approach is to solving some of the pressing challenges we have in this world. I'm a strong believer that entrepreneurship and an entrepreneurial mindset is essential in order to create the world for a better place. Thanks to the Bertelsmann Foundation, where we're fortunate enough to set up an education program to give opportunity to all the entrepreneurial talent to start their businesses, to start their dreams, to create their visions. And it is exciting to see that, in fact, if you give the people the right tools, they start building great things. And the Founders Foundation is an example that if we take an education approach towards entrepreneurship and we educate young talents or even old talents, doesn't matter by age, but early is better, and give them the inspiration and the confidence that they can actually change the world, empower them. This is, I think, a very smart way to leverage all the beautiful brains and beautiful minds we have in this world. So I'm close to Philip, what Philip said, and Amit obviously is a great example of this. I mean, and I'm so excited how you managed to do this because I think the capitalistic model, like the advertiser model in media, is somehow broken because it just makes one party rich and not the consumer and not the people who contribute the value. And that's something it's not a perpetuum mobile, it's not fair, not smart. So, and a few words towards impact. When I started Founders Foundation, I met Brigitte, and impact was for me a bunch of people having, trying to make the world a better place, but it was very far away from entrepreneurship. I believe entrepreneurship and must be social. It cannot be disconnected, and it is so beautiful and exciting. I mean, think about climate change, and I'm meeting with lots of entrepreneurs. They say, and you said this before, if we want to save the world, we cannot afford it. Somebody needs to pay the bill. This is not going to work. I mean, this is crazy. We have enough technology given to solve it. And so that's why most of our, and I'm very, very happy that most of our entrepreneurial talents, they all have a very, very responsible way for the future, especially the younger generation. So this is what I can just encourage all of you who's watching. I mean, you have to be brave because the world is changing. And just climate change is an amazing opportunity, and you can make it work. I mean, I saw this thing on Bitcoin. Obviously, Bitcoin uses a lot of energy. But instead of saying it's bad, come up with a solution how to make it efficient, because the blockchain is great. Bitcoin uses too much energy, yeah, but that's not the reason. So let's solve it. Let's find a way and so forth. And we have to have this attitude of, yes, we can do it. And that's something you all can do it. And I'm sure, Amit, you're a proven example that you did it. So I'm sure there's more and more people, especially all over the world. There's talent. And in fact, my vision is bringing it to connect the world, this beautiful minds, and create entrepreneurship. But that's enough from now. I'm sure others want to talk more. So thanks for being here.
Andreas, may I hand over to you?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Sebastian, and all of you. I mean, I'm really excited, and one can feel the emotion and the passion about what you are doing and how you are doing it. Now, let me briefly introduce or hand over to Marcel Huber, but try to put it in a larger context. Now, Marcel has been he has been an academic at the MCI. He was a researcher in the field of technology, and he can describe it better than I could potentially do it. But now the MCI is per se, it is itself a little startup or spin out of the University of Innsbruck. 25 years, that's nothing for an academic institution. And we started from scratch. There was nothing there. We had a small office, smaller than this one, not as such a nice one as I'm sitting in here. We borrowed chairs, and we had no money and all that. And we just, jumped into let's create solutions, let's create different types of academic studies, continuing education, and what is the research we could potentially do. And our research, obviously, it is always, you have two legs to stand on. But the traditional academic research is more or less addressing the scientific community. And we said, now, shouldn't we do something to create solutions? Solutions for the society, solutions for industries. Sebastian mentioned the technology is there, but is the technology always there? Or some technologies would be still missing or whatever. And out of this initiative came the idea which Marcel has been created and the knowledge and so on. That's more or less my context and the bridge to Marcel. And then we have been, Marcel, we have been in a very early stage at that time. We didn't have really money. There was scarcity all over, but we had ideas. And now let me hand over to you to present your idea and what is the outcome.
Thanks, Andreas, for the introduction. And hope you can hear me now. So you had initially some microphone issues. Yeah, awesome speeches. I hope I'm not now the show breaker or the technician comes at last. I want to lose some words about my becoming an entrepreneur. And honestly, we're no more start anymore. We are in our 12th anniversary, so we are almost half the age of the MCI. And it all started with a lot of spirit and no money. That's usual. And you prepare initially for a valley of death and taxation. But honestly, after now 12 years developing a technology-based solution, it's always a constant process of being knocked down and stand up. So after 12 years, you like it and you continue, or you have to quit. And my lessons learned are also that you also always need a great team to start from, with a lot of spirit, and even a bigger vision. And our vision, and Andreas already started with it, was to develop a system that can produce or provide energy on a regional basis, on a decentralized scale, out of local resources, and at the same time, and that's maybe unique and special, at the same time remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So we call that thing a reverse energy system. So that might sound quite weird, but I try to explain it. It's nature-based. So like all or most of the not bad solutions, it always is a copy-paste from nature. So what we do is we take some forest residues. So forest residues are quite common in Europe because forest industry is quite big, and our forests in Europe are all sustainable. So there's more forests growing in Europe than it is chopped down. So that's an essential basis for being sustainable. And these forest residues, so not the blankets, not the chips for the paper mill, we turn into an energy, power, heat, hydrogen, or replacement gases. And some share we leave at carbon. We call it green carbon. So it's charcoal in fact. And by being based on a carbon neutral bioenergy cycle, we extract a certain share of this carbon and use it for good. That means not burning it anymore. You can use this charcoal for toothpaste. You can use it for making better bricks. You can use it for soil enhancement, for terra preta. So you bring back the carbon into the soil, and that has been done by nature for millions of years. So that's the way why we can dig out carbon today, like stone coal, brown coal. So we're doing this reverse mode with our plants while providing energy. And the big thing is that it comes almost for free. So you provide the energy as an outcome, and as a side effect, you might contribute saving the climate. And I think when it comes on a focused, specific point of view, it comes obvious that the climate change is the biggest issue we have to deal with, because all the social impacts, all the biodiversity issues, they will be triggered and defined by the effect or the final degree we which achieve. So if we will stop at the 1.5 degrees, it should be safe. We are not sure, but it should. But it will end up at a higher level of temperature raise. We all don't know which tipping points are triggered. So it became our vision to significantly contribute to a carbon neutral society. And with our unique technology, we can provide some physical thing. The bad thing on the physical thing is that it always takes a lot of time to develop. But finally, we are building our 27th plant, and our mission is till 2050 to get rid of 1 gigaton of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere by saving and removing. We know that's a big challenge, and there's approximately 8,300 plants to go. So we have already just started, but I think the necessity of this road is set. So we can't leave Paris goals because it will lead to a total disaster from my point of view. So it's great to have this conversation, this round, and talking to such great people, having the same spirit, maybe on different preferences and expertise, but I'm eager to questions and the conversation.
Thank you very much, dear Marcel. And Marcel and Syncraft is actually, from my point, a very good example. That's why we chose it. That economic value and societal and especially ecological value and impact are not a contradiction. I mean, Marcel was quite humble and is quite humble in telling his story, but creating a reactor technology, to extract the biogas from these wood residuals being left over in the forest from the forest industry, just what is out there, not used, to extract the biogas in a reactor, combine it with a gas engine producing steam or heat, actually heat and electricity, and the residual heat more or less drives the reactor. And so heat and also electrical power, and what is left over is not ashes. It is carbon, almost pure carbon powder, which may be used for different means, like Marcel has described. And now power plants have been built in Japan, in Italy, in Germany, in Switzerland, in Austria, obviously, and so on. And still way to go, not pretending that all would be gold-plated and so on. He is in a sustainable startup business, and the MCI is one of the small shareholders. We have been, trying to give the technology which was created actually by him and the team to the startup, and that's more or less the model we try to pursue and we want to learn from. All right, now, is there already first contributions, first questions from the side of our change makers, which you would like to add or bring in or ask to each other? Elsewise, we have, I think, a number of questions, Brigitte and I. But feel free if there's any clarifications to be done, such as I tried to do with Marcel.
If I may jump in really quickly, I wanted to connect, a couple of things that, Philippe was talking about and Sebastian as well. And then, when you look at the solution frameworks that Peter and Marcel are putting out, it's a really interesting zeitgeist conversation to have, especially with the audience that we have, right? So I'll list 6 events that have been a big part of our lives in the past, call it 5 years, right? And I'll put them into two buckets. So think of Greta's, representation of the climate revolution, because that ties in really well with what both Andreas, you and Brigitte were talking about, which is this generational movement, right? It's a generational shift. And so you have Greta's climate revolution, and then we're seeing amazing solutions like what Marcel just highlighted, right? Then you have, the Black Lives Matter movement that took on a global, position, and it was about social and racial and, equality in general, right? And then all of you, were probably paying attention over the past 6 months to what happened with Wall Street bets and, the GameStop, stock issue. And I look at these three and I look at them as what I would call protest movements. They are just inherently protest movements, and people can go find what they want in that protest and build solutions. And then I'll list the second bucket, Bitcoin. And Sebastian, you mentioned Bitcoin, and it does represent some environmental challenges. And in my role as president of the Silicon Valley Blockchain Society, I can talk for hours if you'd like. I know you wouldn't, about how we're thinking about the challenges from an environmental perspective. The second is this concept called decentralized finance, or DeFi. Again, something that has been a big part of everyone's conversation. And the third, which has been in the news over the past month, the idea of NFTs, right? Non-fungible tokens. We've seen that in art. I consider these three protest movements with solutions inbuilt, right? Because they already solve what they do in themselves. But what's in common across all six of them, and this ties in with, Sebastian, what you were talking about earlier, and Philip as well, is that to me, they are separate vectors of the same revolution. And that revolution is what I call the commons revolution, or the revolution of the people, right? Mm-hmm. And it's the generational revolution. So what's really interesting is all of these movements are not particularly organized, without centralized powers or governments backing them. And yet a big swath of decentralized humans have come together to either protest or protest with solutions what can be done, right? And if there's ever a time for optimism, because sometimes we can get drawn up in all of the different spectrum of bad news out there, it's that whether it is leaders like yourselves, Brigitte putting together teams like this, or it is generational change makers like Philip, those movements are already underway. And sometimes we get distracted in the fog of war, and we are not able to see how they're connected. And that is something that excites me a lot, because now it doesn't matter if it's our generation or the one that will inherit the earth. We're all, one way or the other, in an organized and disorganized way, working towards solutions to make this host planet and service her in the way that we should.
Brigitte, do you have questions? Elsewise, I see questions coming in from the audience, but you should have the opportunity. Take it, Brigitte, if you have anything.
Definitely. What I learned around the world within the last, I would say, 10 years is that when you travel a lot, you meet always great people, great entrepreneurs, and you always believe that if they would know each other and they would share knowledge and build solutions together, we would be much faster. So how do you create the ecosystems around the world that are sustainable, so we can properly, basically, on some of the things what Philip was saying, we know a lot, but the implementation is really bad, right? We haven't seen really a lot of movement, even though we know we should do it. And maybe we have the solutions, but we don't know where to find them or put them into action. And I think, like this group here, a lot of this is still coincidence that they get to know each other, even though they are super. And the question is, how do we across continents, and that's a question to you all, how do we build across continents these basically ecosystems alignments, so we can basically be much quicker? And what you were saying, especially in terms of the developing or emerging countries, how do we get more fairness and equity to countries where we normally, at least on the industrial side, are not putting our focus on, right? And I think, and you defined, and I think that was something when I met you first, and Philip, that goes to you as well, using citizens as a resource and the value itself. How do we combine this with the business cases and redefine business cases to build wealth in a different way? So 2 questions.
I can
If I may, I can
go ahead, Peter, please.
kick it off. Okay, thank you. One of the challenges, I believe, when people talk about environmental issues is that we talk about it at the very abstract level and at the mega level oftentimes. People are overwhelmed when we talk about climate change. People are overwhelmed when we talk about plastic pollution because the issues are so massive that it's very hard to connect to. And what I believe is necessary is that we go into subsegments of these issues and solutions and find micro solutions and not be afraid to try to fix small issues also, but do it hundreds of thousands of times over and over again. And I believe the future of environmental change and environmental impact is going to be connecting the micro communities in hyper-curated spaces of micro communities that are trying to solve very specific issues. Right? So, for example, for the cable industry, that might be the recycling of coaxial cables that nobody talks about. But for the cable industry, it's the most difficult waste stream, and they don't have a solution right now. So how can we make sure that we solve that very specific solution? And I believe, and that's the beauty of it, is going to be in solving very specific solutions over and over again and creating global communities that are trying to solve the same issue, right? And connecting to each other. There's a book, I believe it's from 2011 from Paul Hawken. It's called The Blessed Unrest. And in the book, he talks about the biggest movement that the world's history has ever seen is the movement around social and environmental change. So Ahmed is talking about it. In the beginning, when he wrote the book, he thought there's maybe a couple of thousands of 10,000s of organizations around the world. Turns out there's actually millions of organizations around the world trying to make a change, but they're not connected to each other. So we have over and over again organizations and people trying to solve the same issue, but not connected to each other. Right, and that I believe is the future, is connecting those that are trying to solve very specific solutions and creating that network.
Yeah, that's a great point, Peter. If I could, add to that, I mean, I think that there is this perception that if you're not in big lifts, that you're not making a difference, and I think that's a very important myth to put aside. I think it's more important on what it is that you're solving for, not the scale of what you're solving, because we are in an incremental time. We're talking about decentralization. These are, incredible people around the world solving for similar solutions. And to the second point you made, which is, how do we get people to work together? There's a foundational piece to this, right? Traditional capital has gone towards things that provide the quickest exits. This is one of the biggest challenges of Silicon Valley, right? Where, it's always, I'd rather invest in a Snapchat filter system using AI because I know that Snapchat will buy it 1 year later than, a meaningful carbon sequestration effort because it's going to take 7 years to build and then 7 years to just stay beyond that, right? So it's capital structures that have been one of the challenges. The second has always been zero-sum games. The only way for your startup to be successful is if it beats everybody else, right? And that's, you could even, that was the very Trump mentality as well. I don't care what happens, I have to win, right? And everyone can lose and the planet can lose in the bargain. And I think we're starting to make those shifts towards this idea of collaborative capitalism, where we win if we win together. And the end game is not to be the biggest company in the world. Look at the aspirations of Facebook and look how quickly they went from being the vision of connecting the world to becoming so damaging for the social fabric of society, right, around the world. And I think in that context, we're starting to see those shifts happen. We're starting to see organic connections between people working on similar problems, or organic connections where we start seeing people working on different problems but finding incredible common ground. And the fabric of that connection, I think, besides these networks that we're all building, is being driven by change influences like Brigitte amongst us here, because she is starting to stitch together based on a common framework of purpose. And if you have that across investors and change makers, that we're here to fundamentally create a net positive impact on the humans we serve or the planet that we borrow, then you start using that philosophy to invest in or promote or influence or support entrepreneurs that are solving different challenges, but with the same purpose and mission. And I maybe sound a little bit like an optimist here, but I feel like the example I gave with those 6 events of the Commons Revolution, it's that the Commons Revolution has that purpose and DNA in common. It's very rare to see a revolution in the BLM space or in the social justice or climate justice or data sovereignty, which is where obviously rainfall plays, to be in isolation or in opposition to any of these other movements, right? And as a very quick example, one of the pieces we're building into the rainfall model of universal earned income, compensation from the rightful compensation from your data, is that the data points of your daily life that suggest that you drove your electric car today versus your gasoline car, or better yet, you took your bicycle today versus any car, is automatic in the rainfall model. The AI knows that you did something that involved walking, and you can now align that with a carbon credits platform and say, it's not just that I paid for the guilt of my flying from US to Europe, and so I want to buy some carbon credits. I had daily activities that had a net positive impact from a carbon footprint perspective, and we can now convert that into carbon credits and assign them back in raindrops, which is the currency of rainfall, back to the wallet of the person who had these positive behaviors. And suddenly now you're starting to connect climate solutions with data sovereignty. And I feel this fabric of connection between the influencers, the investors, the creators across these different causes, but with the same DNA, leaves us with the kind of world that we're all going to help create.
Amit, sorry.
Go ahead, Marcel.
You just mentioned this carbon credit issue. Biochar, what we produce as a byproduct, generates carbon credits. And there's also a startup company called Carbon Future that it already started trading on blockchain-based open source platform to trade these carbon credits. And the funny thing we realized is, as soon as you talk about the numbers and targets to be fulfilled together, and we talk about these 830 gigatons in the next 80 years to be removed from the atmosphere, there's no competition. There's no competition at all, because even if we do our calculation and we grow annually by 100% the next 10 years, we will be a percentage of the way to go. So this grows common sense. So you also talk to your so-called competitors by how we should deal with it. How should we scale? And everyone can think about Elon Musk. It's maybe different, but by doing his XPRIZE initiative, it addresses one important thing. We have to scale together at the limit to maybe achieve those targets. And I think for the social issues, it's the same. There's no difference. So the target or the goals, they unite the whole movement, and find it very interesting with all those vector theory to bring them together. It's really nice, but big challenge, incredible challenge.
Is it all right if I bring in some questions from the audience? Yeah. And one goes to you. I think Philip, you wanted to say something, but it comes from Raffaele Della Valle. He is in Como. He is an MCI student or exchange student, if I'm not mistaken. And he asks, as you have been mentioning, Philip, you know, the ambitions and emotions and expectations of the generations. And I think, Amit, you also mentioned the word zeitgeist. Yeah. Now, has this really not changed or changed of the young generation? Yeah. I can perhaps clarify or bring in some extra input to the question of Raffaele. Now, my assumption is, see, when I grew up on a farm. I was never in kindergarten. I did not have my private room at home. We were five boys at home, and the sleeping room was not heated, and there was only one room heated. So my ambition was to have a better world and to allow a better world to my kids or to the following generations. But is, for instance, such a will still there? I'm not sure whether I'm leading now Raffaele's question into a certain direction, which I would not want to do, but this would be perhaps an extra input. Is it really different or is it not different? Philip, I think you or whoever would like to respond.
Yeah. I can have a start. I mean, if I get the question right, I feel, I mean, always speaking for me personally, and what I realize from many conversations with like-minded people in my generation is that in the same way, like the last generation and the generation before and the generation even before had their fundamental question of their time. And I mean, especially when we look at Germany, you know, after the war, it was about building up this country again. It was about finding new opportunities, dealing with this guilt. So there were the main questions of the time. And I think our generation, we just realized, and maybe this is the interesting thing. We now realized over the last few years that our question and our task for our job to be done in the next years is not the same like the generation before, which is nothing surprising because I think it has always been like that. But maybe the transformational gap between the is and the ought, and the gap between is maybe a little bit bigger than it has been in the transition from previous generation to the next one. And so this is how I look at it. And two things I would like to add on that is that one thing we have to get right in the next years is that we switch around, or we flip around the burden of proof. I mean, still right now we have a very strong status quo bias. Right. The question is, you know, especially when you talk to governments, it's not about the question, why should we stay with the status quo? It's always the question of why should we change? And when you think about social innovation, environmental innovation, the status quo and the status quo solutions, which are oftentimes broken, have to get under the same scrutiny like new innovation. And right now, the burden of proof between the status quo and the new is just so fundamentally different. So I think that's where we really have to have a mindset change. And the second thing is about the transformation we have in front of us is that we just still don't know all the answers, especially in the answers of implementation. And so we really have to provide so much more experimentation budget. I mean, if you look at Silicon Valley and of what Amit just said, how much money is burned for nothing? And if we started to invest the same money for societal experimentation for sustainable solutions, then we would really get we would experience this iteration of nine failures, but one solution really then is the rocket star. And so I think those are the two remarks, flipping around the burden of proof and getting a new idea of how much budget we have to provide for just pure experimentation and sandboxing, because we will not be so genius that we will find all the solutions we need in the next years just at the first shot.
Would anyone?
Yeah, and if I could quickly add to what Philip said, I think that the big generational shifts are that we've often lived in a culture where we operate in binary choices. It's black or white, right? And truth is we live in 50 shades of gray. The generational shift has a lot of negatives that get attached to this, Gen Z and the young millennials, obsessed with phones, vanity, Instagram versus anything else. And it's almost like then saying, if that's black, then there can be no white. And the reality is, we're all complex beings. But in all of that is this incredible awake awareness to spend their time, which is their greatest form of capital, on things that matter to the planet and matter to society. And I think that now dovetailing with the fact that capital structures are changing. We're starting to get to a world where decentralization again of capital is allowing people to invest their values. The whole NFT movement was a great example of people being able to, invest in LGBTQ art talent, or minority art talent, or a talent from areas that they wanted to support, without having the entry point of being able to afford to walk into a gallery and pay for art, right? Because the curation was already above a certain point. That democratization of access, not just on the creator economy side, but also on the investor economy side, means that people like Philip and his generation can invest 100 euros or 1,000 euros into the causes that matter, into the entrepreneurs that matter, with the expectation that there will be the same kind of experimentation, Philip, that you talked about, where 9 efforts could fail and 1 succeeds, and that 1 ends up being what Marcel is doing, right? And suddenly now we're starting to see genuine, meaningful solutions, and where we are consistently headed in that direction, right? The Bitcoin conversation, even though there are negatives attached to it, it gave birth to an entire industry of decentralization. The number of people, I was in Miami last week at the Bitcoin Miami conference. There were probably 20% of our generation, 80% was Philip's generation. And they were sitting there talking about what they're going to enable with the powers of decentralization, right? When you apply that to a creator economy and you start applying that to people saying, I'm not building that Snapchat filter because who cares? It doesn't benefit anyone. And they're working on the kind of solutions that we're talking about. Just imagine that new force, the new entrepreneur workforce. Capital is going to have no choice but to change the way it behaves, because that's where the opportunities are going to be. And I've always said this to my VC friends here in Silicon Valley. You have only one job as an investor, just one job. It's not to tell me your political ideology. It's not to tell me whether Greta should keep her mouth shut or continue fighting, right? That's not your job. You have one job. It is to create outsized return on your capital by recognizing the biggest blue ocean strategies. Now, whether you believe in impact or not, I'm not here to lecture you. But if you believe that your job is to find the biggest blue ocean strategies, well, I'll tell you what, where you're looking is not where they are, right? It's in these planetary solutions. So wake up to the opportunity, even if you don't want to wake up to the responsibility.
If I may, you know,
Sebastian, it's in your hands, I think, right? Or Peter, was it you?
Sorry? Yes, correct. And I wanted also to show in a way the flip side of this, because this generation is entering an era of unprecedented challenges, really unprecedented. Back in, you know, and it's interesting, Andreas, I also grew up at a farm with five sons, you know, so I was connecting with that. When you thought about it, you said, okay, if I do well for myself and I go to university, which my parents were never able to, right, at a certain point, and I do well for myself and I trust in the system, so the entire economy is going to be better. There was a trust in the system. I think that is not true anymore. Because whether we like it or not, we live in unprecedented times of polarizations, political polarizations all around the world. I live in Atlanta, US, of course, that's one of them, the most extensive examples of that. But also in Europe, in Brazil, in India, you see political polarization. And as a result of that, ecology and the environmental pursuit is actually being polarized also. So there's no common ground around the environment. Maybe there is in Europe more, but not around the world. This polarization from the economical perspective, whether you like it or not, and you probably read in Capital of the 21st Century, there's a massive polarization in terms of wealth right now. And I think that those are challenges that are unprecedented, that is whatever we can do to make sure that we build a system that when young people come into the economy, let's say, you know, that it's a system that actually provides social, environmental, and personal well-being at the same time, which I don't think we have right now.
Is it okay if I bring in another question? Yep. It has to do with blockchain. I think it goes to Amit, but that's not, you know, everyone's welcome who would like to contribute. Now, Dr. Harald Schmid, I am not sure about his background. He sent me a question which is quite short, and I'm not sure whether it is simple. How can blockchain technology help social enterprises to solve sustainable problems? For instance, climate change. Is there good examples?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Marcel gave an example earlier of exactly, you know, a use case of that. There's a bunch of, you know, we have about 8 or 10 projects on across the Silicon Valley Blockchain Society that are applying, you know, tenets of the blockchain to solve for you know, energy consumption, for, you know, for the grid. We even have one project that's, it's a company called Flaring Solutions that is focused on the issue that Sebastian brought up of, you know, Bitcoin's mining problem. And what it does is it uses, on one hand, it takes the flaring gas that is a byproduct of oil production that goes out into the environment, and it actually uses that gas to power the rigs. So instead of it going out into the environment, it actually is used to power the rigs that then do the Bitcoin transactions, right? And there's a ton of examples like that where it's the underlying tenets of the blockchain. And I would very quickly give one core example that then, you know, starts to apply to all social issues, climate being one of them. One of the core functions of the blockchain, you know, regardless of whether you get into a debate of, should Bitcoin be worth 35,000 US dollars or 60,000? We miss the point if we get into those debates. The core use case of the blockchain that is so powerful is decentralized identity management and provenance. And what I mean by that is the ability to put the world's identity onto a hashed, secure public chain. So when a refugee from Syria runs for her life and comes into a camp in Jordan, she doesn't have anything on her. And even if she had a passport, it's a passport to a country whose government you don't recognize, so you cannot verify it. And this idea of being, not being identified, not being banked, goes on to affect life in so many ways that we take for granted, right? It's the same thing with provenance. That was my land. I had that degree. I did that work, and that disappears from your records because you ran away from, an oppressive regime, for example. All of these things the blockchain solves for in such a clever, simple way. And now you can layer on your solutions. You can layer on what you're doing with the energy grid, how much solar energy you produced in your home or how much you consumed, right? And starting to have provenance for this shows you why the core of the blockchain is so fundamental. Now, the smarter projects, and Marcel alluded to that, are starting to unlock the power of tokenization on top of this blockchain. And now you can create energy credits, and you can pay people for the energy credits they're creating, and you can do it in a cost efficient way. You can do it in a way where transactions are properly verifiable and protected, and you don't have to give up people's identity. And the work that we're doing in Rainfall to tie that with income for positive climate behavior. There are tons of not just theoretical solutions, but incredible entrepreneurs actually implementing that. And I would say over the next 10 years, we're going to see very concrete return on investment, not just from a financial perspective, but from a value perspective, using blockchain for energy solutions.
Thank you very much for this comprehensive picture. Brigitte, any questions from your side?
No, I think it would be great if we have the time to take one or two questions from the audience, if there is some.
Yep.
Because I think the learning effect from these entrepreneurs towards the students and the conversation with them, I think that is the value of this whole round.
Now let me see. There is a number of them, but for instance, yep, that was asked. Sorry, I hope I haven't deleted it. There it goes. Johannes Ortner. Johannes Ortner is a lecturer at the MCI, and he is a financial consultant. He was the chief executive of quite a large banking group here. And he says, very cool panel and discussion, Brigitte and Andreas. So I think we also may mention this, to give you this little feedback. Now, and he comes from the financial sector. And he says, to make change, we need ideas, but also people who believe in them. And we need finance. The financial system is still mainly working to make money out of money. We need to change that and lead financial liquidity to change-making projects and change-making companies. Thousands of companies work on a change to more sustainability, but there are very few banks, now is the question, that start to change their business model. How can we change the business model of the banks? What is the experience of the panel? The business model of the banks.
I don't want to. Yeah. Sebastian, please go ahead, please.
we can't hear you.
Sebastian?
Okay, would you like to step in as long as he's not?
No. Yeah, happy to till Sebastian can get back in. You know, one of the key factors we've seen with working. Oh, please go ahead.
Sebastian?
No, you're breaking up, Sebastian. Sorry.
Shall I bring in a different question for the time being so that Sebastian can try to fix his system?
If you wish, yeah. I wanted to quickly say on the banks, you know, one of the things that we're seeing practically with some of the banks that we work with, at the end of the day, they're driven by their customers, right? And what is starting to change is who that customer is, where the wealth is. You know, you've probably heard of the. But
I don't know. I don't have
the 68 trillion transfer that is about to happen. It's a generational transfer of wealth to the next generations. These are all clients at banks. The number of banks that we're talking to that have come to ask for different solutions in rolling out new products and being able to access new alpha, if you may, right? And that alpha has been, you know, startups creating some of these solutions. The banks that don't change their ways will start suffering and will see their clients move to the banks of the future. And you know, that is something that is starting to happen already. So to the question, I agree 100%. In a broken way, Sebastian. So I think that the opportunity here for all of us is that without vilifying any existing structures of capital, it's about taking them on journeys to where we're all headed. And where we're headed is, you know, back to that concept of the zeitgeist, and banks are going to have to catch up.
It doesn't work.
I can hear our technicians in the studio. Please keep your conversation private. All right. Perhaps I may bring in a different question, Sebastian, as it seems not to work so far. And perhaps Susanne Niederhauser, she sits in Vienna. She's an MCI student. And perhaps this may be one of the final questions, as I see that we are running out of time. And she says to the panel, if every one of you could make 3 suggestions, just like more word rap, what would you desire to be changed from a regulatory framework?
Yeah,
I would go. Sure.
If from a regulatory perspective, there's 2 that I want to point out. Is one is making sure there's no benefits anymore and subsidies to the fossil fuel industry or other industries, because there's something that's called the green premium, which Bill Gates also in his latest book talks about the green premium. I see actually tables of energy, what is the green premium versus the regular. And you see that for materials. You see that for all kinds of things. And Marcel is probably very familiar to that. The problem with the green premium is oftentimes that the hurdle to overcome, for example, fossil fuel prices, is very high because a lot of subsidies goes into these technologies. So definitely that is one that I would look into, is making sure there's an incentivization of the green energy, green solutions. That is one. And secondly is effective taxation. And there's enough money in the world, but somehow, we like it or not, taxation is very unequal around the world. There was recently another article in the US that the billionaires are basically paying no taxes, almost no taxes. And me as a European, when I get questions about taxation in the US, I say, yes, but I did go to university, very, very good university, practically for free. I did get my Social Security for free and health, and I have a brother who was recovering from leukemia. If he was in the US, without an effective system, he should have sold his house probably to be. And all of that is linked in a way to taxation. And right now, there's no effective global system for taxation yet. Because taxation, and yes, we cannot go overboard with taxation, but the core level of taxation and taxation equity is a very important issue that we haven't solved yet.
I think I want to add to Peter, because I think this taxation issue is somewhat something I would call my mood as well. As a technician, I want to keep it simple as a one solution. It seems to be very simple if you tax CO2, because it really hits several things in one. If you tax CO2 the right way, not overdone, not overheated, what happens? Everything gets more regional, more resilient, because these transporting everything around the world gets weird by itself. Maybe subsidies are a good idea, but they always tend to be corrupted in some way. I think humans are, in fact, quite simple at last. So you have to tell them, or it has to be defined what we do not want, and this is CO2 in the atmosphere, and this global approach, with neglecting regional issues. And I think there's really a lot of power in this CO2 taxation, where you get these amounts of money and spend it into more resilience, into renewables, and to social well-being on a regional basis. And I think that's it, and that has to be set by the governance. So global governance, of course, may be a dream of mine, but at least on a European level, I would claim this is feasible, and we should push that and spread word of this success CO2 taxation as fast as possible.
Maybe I can add on that. I think one fundamental fallacy is that many governments still believe in the myth that what has value in society, is just a reflection of individual preferences and like nature-given markets. And what the governments have to realize is that what has value and what has which cost is a derivative of regulation in many cases, of what you price in or what you do not internalize or what you externalize. And so we have to have really and I think governments have to develop a new understanding of their influence, of making sure that the true value and the true costs are reflected, and realizing that regulation is not above value creation, but it's one of the main drivers defining what has value in society and what doesn't. And the second thing is that we have to bring experimentation, open innovation, all those tools which have been long established in in business and in startups, really have to bring it into government as well, and really tuning up the government processes to become more resilient. And I think one thing is really, especially in Germany, we have a big problem of silos, big problem of the departments of government are not working together. And so they're really incapable of bringing things forward sometimes, what we've seen in the pandemic as well. So I think we have to have a reform of the state which brings everything into mission orientation. So really overcoming those silos of ministries and departments and all that. And we have to have a fundamental, quite radical mission orientation. So that will be my main wishes and main wishes for regulation.
I'll quickly add to that. From we do a lot of work with the regulators on different policies, especially as it applies to tech, and I would say the question, especially for Philip's generation, is not the what, it's the whom, because until we have the new whom in regulatory bodies, the recognition of what they're regulating for what incentive and what outcome is much harder to get through. A quick example, I've been working with a well-known senator here in the US on thinking about a policy around blockchain and crypto and so on and so forth. And I realized that the first journey of that relationship was helping her understand the underlying philosophy of decentralization and the reason why something like Bitcoin even needs to be in existence before you can get into explaining Bitcoin or explaining, cryptocurrencies or DLTs or any of that, right? Nothing is going to be more powerful than seeing the next generation start to realize the importance of being part of that regulatory framework. Because, I love this quote from Buckminster Fuller. We are called to be the architects of the future, not its victims. And I think in many ways, here we are, especially Philip's generation, fighting as the victims of so many institutional fundamental issues, regulatory frameworks being one of them. And so that's why for me, the who starts making these regulatory changes is almost as important, if not more important, than what they are.
Thank you very much. I fear we need to come to an end soon. If that's okay for you, I would suggest to give the word to Brigitte for a final statements, final comments, final roundup, whatever you would like to do, Brigitte, and then hand over to me again to do the closing, the farewell. Is that okay?
Thank you, Andreas, so much. Thank you for the opportunity to test a new format. That was basically a new way of introducing great people around the world and sharing our knowledge and our vision of the future for having a home here on this earth. And I think it's one of the greatest privilege, at least I faced during I live on this world, and being capable of realizing that. And I think especially for the young people, I think it's more especially the generation of Philip, but as well as greater and all the ones to come, that we have to enable them to be, and exactly what Ahmed was saying, not to be a victim, but to be part of the solution. And I think we discussed a couple of solutions now. There are so many around the world. And I wish that the students at your management basically school will reach out to these young entrepreneurs and get aligned and ask questions and be reflective and really have the feeling that they can be part of this. And if they got something out of these 90 minutes, I would be delighted. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you so much for all your contributions. Thank you so much to you, Brigitte Mohn, for having brought us together. And my ambition and my hope, desire, is that this little event is not just a flash in the pan, a straw fire, which quickly burns and then again extinguishes. But to have an impact, a longer impact, not just on our students, as you have been saying, Brigitte, but perhaps also among yourselves, each other, to see what can be the outcome of this introduction. Now, I will be. I have to close this event as I have been, or we have been exploiting your time already and overextending the time frame. Thank you, Amit Pradhan. Thank you, Peter Shellstrat. Thank you, Philipp von der Wippel. Thank you, Sebastian Borek. Thanks a lot also to Marcel Huber, and special gratitude to Brigitte Mohn again. You have been inspiring us. I have been fascinated what I've been hearing, listening to, and as I said, it is the emotion and the passion which goes beyond technology and the content. And one of you, I think it was you, Peter, said we should be the architects of the future and not the victims. Continue on, keep on going, keep on changing the world towards sustainability, create solutions for society and for our planet. Thank you so much. Now we are coming to an end. Once again, many thanks to all our partners, our media partners, our event partners. Now, this semester has been especially our Jubilee semester. We have been welcoming William Bissell, the chairman of Fab India and Organic India this week. We have been welcoming Jörg Wuttke, the president of the European Chamber of Commerce in China, Friedrich von Bohlen and Halbach, one of the CureVac investors, and yesterday Jean-Claude Juncker, the former president of the European Commission. We will still we will keep on in our series. Robin Dunnigan will be the next one on June 21st. She is chargée d'affaires. So if you want to translate it, the interim ambassador of the United States to Austria. And finally, at the end of June, Romano Prodi, the former Prime Minister of Italy and longtime President of the European Commission. And I think you have been a highlight in our Jubilee Distinguished Guest Lecture Series. And I only can congratulate you and thank you all for what you have been doing. Thank you so much and stay in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful, successful week.
Thank you. It's awesome. Take care.